An hour southwest of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, there is a small town. It has a population of just under 3,000 and is considered mostly as a through town that connects highways to larger cities. This town is Youngwood, Pennsylvania, and the story of its forgotten history involving the creation of this entire area and the railroad that this region owes its existence to. Town history. From the time of the building of the southwest branch of the Pennsylvania Railroad until the year 1900, the surrounding country was farm and timberland. Prior to 1902, the entire area of Youngwood was a part of Hempfield Township. This map comes from the 1867 Atlas of Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. You can see a Mrs. Young located in the middle of the map, giving a hint on where the town name Youngwood comes from. This map shows how the area looked before the railroad came through. In 1899, a land company known as the Youngwood Land Company was formed. Mr. E. M. Gross, one of the members of the land company, purchased the John Young and James Woods family farms of Greensburg, together with that of David Heiberger, which adjoined to these farms. Part of this land was bought by the Pennsylvania Railroad for railroad yards. The combined name Youngwood was first given to the railroad station, and a few years later the town. This map comes from a topographic sheet of the Connellsville area in 1902. In the year 1900, the company laid out lots on both sides of 4th Street, extending on the west side of the yards. About the same time, local Henry Strobel laid his land out in lots. All these lots were placed on sale in 1901. Owing to a disagreement between Henry Strobel and the land company, the lots were actually laid out in different dimensions. This accounts for the asymmetry of 5th and 6th Street, where they join Depot Street. This image is from a Sanborn Fire Insurance map from the year 1927. In 1901, L. Lowe and Charles Haller entered into the contracting business. This firm was known as Lowe and Haller. The large lumberyard was built by them on North 3rd Street and was serviced by the railroad. With easier access to lumber available and the sale of lots, houses began to spring up almost overnight. At the end of the year 1901, about 75 homes had been erected. This postcard of South 4th Street is dated 1910, giving a good idea of the early 75 homes. Streetcar tracks were also laid, and the West Penn Railway ran a car every half hour between Youngwood and Greensburg. Later, this route was also extended to Scottsdale. In 1902, Youngwood was incorporated into a borough. On November 10th, the first election for borough offices were conducted. The results of the election were Burgess Henry Strobel, the previously mentioned man who owned land plots north of Depot Street. In 1903, the West Penn Power Company furnished lights for the citizens of the town. In the same year, the Fayette Gas Company furnished gas for heat and electricity. In 1905, the first telephone exchange was installed in the Fiscus and Riblet store seen on the right-hand corner. Other utilities and improvements came rapidly. Sewers were laid, streets were paved, and the sidewalks were laid. This is a later image that shows a better perspective of the trolley line and paved street. This picture was taken several years later in 1935. Railroad development. For many years the town was known as a railroad town. It seems that even before there was a town, there was a railroad, the southwest branch of the Pennsylvania Railroad. This is a similar map of Hempfield in the year 1867 and shows where the railroad carved through the land. On the middle of the screen, you can see the Youngwood station, where the town would later get its name from. As early as 1853, the Pennsylvania Railroad proposed a branch line running from Greensburg to Connellsville. By 1870, the rising prominence of quality Connellsville coke and steel making helped change railroad financial feasibility. As a result, the Southwest Pennsylvania Railroad was organized on March 16, 1871, by Pennsylvania Railroad interests. The railroad was completed as far as Connellsville from Greensburg on April 1, 1873. The junction in Greensburg with the Pittsburgh to Altoona main line in the southwest branch had extremely heavy traffic. All of the coal and coke coming out of the Connellsville coal and coke region went on the main line here. You can see that this system was rebuilt on October 11, 1890. In order to relieve some pressure from this junction, a bypass was built, sometime around the year 1888. This made access to the southwest branch easier, routing some of the westbound traffic away from the heavy junction. It also avoided the Radboud Tunnel, which was directly to the left of Greensburg, another bottleneck for traffic. In May of 1881, the Southwest Pennsylvania Railway Board authorized building the first 7 miles of the Slickley Branch, from Youngwood up Slickley Creek towards Traeger. This branch reached around 10 different mines in the area. This map is from abandonrails.com, and they have several pictures of the previous branch line. Here's a better image that I created of the southwest branch, with the Slickley branch being seen in yellow, and the thick red line at the top of the screen being the Pennsylvania Railroad main line. The southwest branch was a lifeline in the region, providing job opportunities for the entire Laurel Highlands. Railroad growth. To give an idea of the volume going through this region, here are two different statistics from historical events that affected the railroad. On February 9, 1891, the United Mine Workers of America began a coal and coke workers' strike in the Connellsville Coke region to protest a 10% wage cut made in the aftermath of the Bering Panic. When the region is in full production, the Pennsylvania Railroad runs 37 freight trains and 60 coal trains daily. On May 27, 1891, the Connellsville Coke strike ended after Henry Clay Frick and Andrew Carnegie brought in strike breakers and Pinkerton guards. Pinkerton Guards were a private security guard and detective agency established around 1850. The mines operated on a non-union basis, and because of this, over 16,000 men were lost to the United Mine Workers Union. The strike had cut the Pennsylvania Railroad's coal and coke tonnage by 22%, down to 3,356,851 tons. Coal and coke accounted for 58% of the Pennsylvania Railroad's freight tonnage at the time. To handle this amount of freight, sometime between the years 1899 and 1901, a large rail yard was built to sort local freight for north and southbound traffic. Here is a map that shows an outline of the yard, with the southwest branch cutting down the screen and the Slickley branch heading east to the bottom right. This is a combined topographic sheet of the Connellsville area in 1902. Early in 1902, the Pennsylvania Railroad built a new brick passenger station, a freight station, and a six-room office building, the same year that Youngwood became a borough. These passenger freight stations replaced the previously built ones on the east side of the tracks, at the intersection of the southwest and Slickley branches. The drawing at the top shows a perspective of Depot Street facing west, with the passenger station on the left and the office building on the right. This photo of the Youngwood station in the bottom left was taken in 1908. The postcard of the YMCA in the bottom right is from 1908 as well. This Sanborn Fire Insurance map from the year 1927 does a good job of showing the location of the freight, passenger, and office buildings of Youngwood. The freight station on the left is just north of the office building seen in the right photo. This location was the southern tip of the large classification yard. Replacing the former passenger and freight stations was a large roundhouse and maintenance shops. This was at the intersection of the southwest and Slickley branches, located directly south of the rail yard and new stations on Depot Street. You can see in the left image the location of the boiler room, generating room, and a detailed description of the reservoir that had a capacity of 1 million gallons of water. On the right image, you can see the machine shop, roundhouse, and turntable. This perspective of the roundhouse is shown from the main line to the southwest branch, with it being located on the other side of the Slickley Creek. You can see the blacksmith and machine shop to the left of the roundhouse. Being located adjacent to a creek plagued problems for the railroad, with a washout from 1905 being shown in the picture. This is a great image of Youngwood in the background, with the main line being seen in the top right of the picture. Hump Classification Yard. A hump yard is a gravity-fed sorting system of railroad cars. They are sent to the classification yard where cars are combined into trains that are in the same destination. There is normally a scale which measures the weight of each car and then brakes, called retarders, that slow down the cars as they roll down the grade to each track. This artistic depiction of the Youngwood yard is circa 1914. The point of view is from the overhead iron bridge, which crossed the yard until the 50s when Route 119 was upgraded. This is an actual picture from a similar perspective around the year 1930. It is labeled as the Pennsylvania Railroad Scales and Yards, Youngwood, PA. You can see on the right-hand side of the picture the southbound hump, It is noted that the southbound hump did not have a scale, as it was primarily empty hopper cars on their way back to the mines. This picture, also from the 1930s, is labeled "The Pennsylvania Railroad Yards of Youngwood, PA." This is of a different perspective, believed to be the northbound yard. You can see boxcars in the background and make out the Pennsylvania Railroad logo on a few hopper cars. Here's a schematic of the yard from around 1934. You can see the southbound classification yard at the top, which had a capacity for 616 rail cars. The northbound receiving yard had a capacity of 378 cars. This track chart from 1945 shows the southwest branch from Greensburg to Youngwood on the left-hand side. This also shows the best schematic of the 4 total yards on the right-hand side, with the 2 southbound yards on the left and the 2 northbound yards on the right. The controversy. On May 11, 1903, the new westbound hump yard opened at Bell's Mills, East Altoona, PA, making it the first official hump yard in the United States. This yard was built by the Pennsylvania Railroad and was one of the largest classification yards in the U.S. It consisted of several different yards and tracks and had an east and west hump, each being multiple tracks wide. This contradicts the statement that the Youngwood Yard was the first hump yard in the U.S. According to local and regional historians, the Youngwood Yard was in fact built before the Altoona Hump Yard. As previously stated earlier, it was built sometime between 1899 and 1901, which make it at least 2 to 4 years older than the Altoona yards. The difficulty with the Southwest Branch is that it technically first started out as its own railroad. It was built by Pennsylvania Railroad interests, but was officially separate from the Pennsylvania Railroad record keeping. The tricky thing about history is that most of it is lost or forgotten, and since the Youngwood Yard was supposedly built before being officially a part of the Pennsylvania Railroad, the documentation of that may be lost forever to time. This is a photograph of the yard from 1839, quite possibly the first aerial photograph taken of the yard. Current day. Today, there is still a Southwest Pennsylvania Railroad. It is a Class 3 railroad, serving as a short line between Greensburg and Connellsville, where it meets Norfolk Southern and CSX. It even has a connection with the Class 2 Wheeling and Lake Erie Railroad just past Scottsdale. Like almost all small communities today, Youngwood is without passenger train service. There was once a time when passenger service was adequate. There were 4 round trips daily from Uniontown to Pittsburgh, and 3 round trips daily on the Slickery branch. Today, there are little reminders of the large classification and hump yards that once stood. Half of the yard was developed into an industrial park featuring several warehouses. Most of the tracks were torn up during the Conrail era, and the yard remains unused and in disrepair. There still is roughly the original southbound hump remaining today. There was track on the hump as it was active right up until 1982 when Conrail closed the yard as a manned facility. They ripped out several tracks as the traffic through the region decreased in the following decades. Hopefully this hump can be preserved and recognized one day for its historical significance in American railroading history. The Five Star Trail is a bike trail that goes from Greensburg to Youngwood beside the right-of-way of the Southwest Pennsylvania Railroad. It continues towards Armburst on former trolley and railroad right-of-ways. The Youngwood Railway Station remains today, with attempts to revitalize it as a cafe and a museum being an ongoing struggle. It remains open on Fridays during Lent for fish fries. This postcard was sometime from 1930 to 1945. To end the video, I have a quote. People have lost their history, the what and how and why of things. They know so little of the places where they live. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you made it the whole way to the end, please consider leaving a like as it will help my channel grow. I look forward to creating more content in the future about regional transit around the Pittsburgh area. Thank you.